Hi guys, it's me, I'm back. I actually made a decision to do something that I talked about in one of my previous vlogs, and I went to my very first ever Halloween Horror Nights. Shocking. If you know me, you know that I am a gigantic scaredy cat. I don't like things jumping out at me. The Haunted Mansion scared me for years. I have gotten over that, but nonetheless, giant scaredy cat. And I went to Halloween Horror Nights, and I did all 10 houses. And I'm going to give you guys tips on how I was able to conquer Horror Nights, and any tips I have for fellow scaredy cats who kind of want to go but are pretty nervous about it. Tip number 1, get Express Pass. I know what you're thinking, Bridget, why would I pay extra money to get front of the line access when I don't even know if I'm going to like it? Express Pass helped me a lot because I knew the longer I'd have to wait in line, the more anxious and like nervous I would get about doing something instead of just getting in line, getting to the front and doing it. It helped eliminate a lot of that, like that anxiety that you get from like just waiting and anticipation, and it kind of like you scared your ticket, you got into like the short line, like maybe 10 people to get into the house, and then you were in the house. So like you didn't have time to really wait for it to happen, which really helped me. Number 2, watch YouTube video walkthroughs. Now this does mean not going opening night, which for any non-huge Horror Nights fan or any scaredy cat like myself is perfectly fine. I recommend this because a lot of different news sources and different blogs and like YouTube channels will actually get invited by Universal to go film opening night and get to do walkthroughs of the house where they're actually able to film. And that kind of gives you an example of like what to expect. I know for me, I watched a couple walkthroughs a bunch of different times to like, okay, this is how it's going to be. This is kind of the speed of it. It's not super dark, or it is super dark, or there's a lot of flashing lights or whatever. You get a sort of a feel for the house without actually having to be in it. Number 3, which is kind of an obvious thing, but for me, it really helped me mentally, was instead of like not knowing what was lurking around the corner, I kind of expected something to be there around every single corner. I expected something to jump out at me. And if it didn't, I was like, okay, well then, you know, it's coming around the next corner. And for me, that kind of helped minimize the like, oh, it's something, you know, minimize the fear of like something coming out. I just expected it to come out, and then it was less frightening that it was there because I expected it to be there. Number 4, go with a group and someone you trust especially. For me, I went with my boyfriend. Before we went, I actually sent some ground rules and sort of a game plan. You know, I said I refuse to go first into any house. Even the one I was most excited about, Ghostbusters, I don't want to go first. I want to be able to hold your hand. Those sorts of things. You know, having a game plan set up and an exit plan set up in case you don't like it, or in case you do get too freaked out and you're like, nope, I'm done, can almost give you a little bit of relief knowing like I don't have to, but if I continue to enjoy it, I will. It was even the type of thing where I said like, I can only promise you that I'm going to do 3 houses. I did my first one and I literally walked out laughing. I had such a good time, but we'll get to that. I also said like, if I need a break, I need a break. And that could be in a restaurant. It could be in Diagon Alley, because there's nothing like scary in Diagon Alley. At least for this year, 2019, HHN 29, there wasn't anything scary. Most restaurants are pretty low key. You might see scary stuff outside, but in the restaurants, it's pretty calm. Also just knowing like, I need to drink a lot of water. I need to eat something. That way you're not making yourself sick by not eating or drinking like food or nutrition. And number 5, if you have any sort of instinct or feeling or gut reaction to, I'm really intrigued, or this sounds really interesting to me, check it out. You might remember in my annual pass holder vlog, I'll include a link to it, or I'll include a video clip of it right after this. But I say like, I'm really intrigued by the Ghostbusters house. I don't know if I can stomach Horror Nights, but I really kind of want to see that. I'm a big scaredy cat, but I'm really intrigued by the Ghostbusters house, so I kind of want to go. I haven't decided yet, You'll have to wait and see. I'll have to wait and see what happens. And it got, like, it stuck in my head. It was something that never really left my head. And I think if you have something like that, I would say do it. You're never going to get the full courage to do it. I'm going to be honest, I didn't start with the Ghostbusters house. It just didn't happen that way. We started with a different house, which I said I'll talk about it after this. And Ghostbusters was one of the last ones I did. And I was actually really happy I did it last because it was kind of like my prize for doing all the other houses. I got to do my Ghostbusters house. So definitely recommend doing that. And, you know, let's say you go and you do one house and you hate it. Like freaking out, panic attack, hate it, hate it, hate it. But what if you really enjoy it? You would never know if you didn't go. And this is coming from someone who, like, people are like, oh, have you ever been to horror nights? I'm like, I'd never go to horror nights. Why would you do that? Who likes being scared? I don't like being scared. I loved going to horror nights this last time. Those are sort of my 5 tips for a Scaredy Cat's Guide to Horror Nights. And just different things that kind of helped me get through my night. A recap. So I went on a Thursday night. It's Sunday today, October 13th, and I went Thursday, October 10th. And I was really nervous about it. Like really nervous about it. Like didn't really sleep the night before. Which to look back on it, the exhaustion could have been why I was able to get through all the houses, but probably not. I worked a full day before it. Ended up going straight to horror nights and going to horror nights. We got there right around 7:30, and at that point, normally they have scare actors in the front, like where they scan your tickets. By that point, they had already gone back to their scare zone, so I didn't have to worry about that right away, which was nice. I was able to get into the park, get my locker, catch my breath, grab my map, and then decide a game plan. I didn't have to worry about a chainsaw person chasing me down, because that's what's happening this year. The chainsaw people from one of the scare zones and arcade are up in the front during the beginning of horror nights. Once we did that, we realized that, oh, and I had Express. I don't know if I said that. Killer Clowns from Outer Space was actually one of the first houses you like come to, and it didn't have a super long wait. So we're like, okay, we'll do that. And a lot of people said I should start with Ghostbusters, but I was also kind of excited about Killer Clowns from Outer Space. I've never seen the movie, just to put that out there. I've never seen Killer Clowns from Outer Space. I love this house. I laughed my way through it. Like, I'm not even kidding. If you don't like clowns, you might have a different experience than me, but like, I love this house. Like, something would jump out and I'd be like, oh, and then I'd start laughing. And then something else would happen. I'd be like, oh, and then I'd start laughing. Like, I wasn't scared. It was more comical to me. And I think part of it had to do with, is it kind of a bright house? Some houses you'll go in are super dark. This was not. This was very bright and colorful, and they had cotton candy cocoons like they do in the movie, which actually I'm planning on watching in a couple days from now, just so I like know what I saw. And I'll insert a clip here if I can if it's not too dark and the audio is actually like usable. It's very loud at horror night, so if you don't do loud, bring earplugs. They're totally fine with you wearing earplugs like in the houses or like out and about. You can totally do that. I actually brought some with me but didn't use them. So that's another little tip. But I'll include that now.
So I just did my first Horror Nights house. It was Killer Clowns from Outer Space and it was amazing. I actually had someone tell me not to start with that and to start with the Ghostbusters, but I'm so glad I started with it. It was so good. I was laughing the entire time, even when like people were jumping out at me, I'd scream and then start laughing. I'm so glad I did that. I'm still really scared. I think we're going back to Depths of Fear and Nightingale's Blood Pit, which I'm very nervous about because I hear there's lions in Nightingale's Blood Pit. So we will see what happens.
But I literally walked out of that house laughing hysterically. And it wasn't that it was laughing because it was funny, but it was laughing because other people were like, it was fun scares. Like they were actually jumping out at you, but it wasn't like rah, like in your face. They were clowns, so they weren't as terrified. I know a lot of people would be like, who are terrified of clowns, would be like, ah. That's my worst nightmare. Maybe not do that one first. But for me, that would be like, that was probably the ideal situation for me to get myself into, because as soon as I did that, I was really excited because I enjoyed that. Like, I had such a good time in that house. Next, we did Depths of Fear, which was a original IP, meaning it was an original idea that one of the creative directors came up with. And it's basically like you're in this underground sea lab that they go too deep, and there's this parasitic thing that like takes over half of it, and that was scary, really dark, a lot of flashing lights. So if you don't like flashing lights, probably stay away from that one. Also, the ground is really spongy, and I assume it's because it's supposed to be like matte, like kind of like underwatery. It really bothered my knees. So if you don't have great knees or ankles, just be wary. The ground's not always flat in the houses. I've seen it where it's like this, where it's like spongy, where it's like not rocky, but not like smooth. Sometimes it's even like slick, which is, I've seen people eat it. So I've heard of people eating it. Next, we did Nightingale's Blood Pit, which was, I was really scared going into this one because I'd heard like a lot of vloggers, like Tim Tracker, talked about like the lion that comes out, and like there's these weird like the nightingales, which are just trying to suck your blood, and like I was really nervous going into this one. It was scary. Like, it was really scary. The person behind me for like the last part of it was just like, no, as we were coming out. Then we saw Academy of Villains, which is a dance show. I don't know if I've talked about it already, but for this year, 2019, there's actually 2 shows. There's Academy of Villains, Altered States, and there is Marathon of Mayhem, which is a light water projection show similar to the Universal Cinematic Celebration. I don't remember the exact name. It's similar to that, only they have actual clips from the different IPs in like the non-original IPs in it. So like clips from Killer Clowns from Outer Space, House of a Thousand Corpses, Monsters, Stranger Things, Ghostbusters, Us. I think that's all of them. I didn't actually get a chance to see it. By the time we were like, when I was there, they only had 3 showings, so it didn't work out with our timing well. Like, we saw Academy of Villains at like 9, and the next one's at 10 and 11 and 12, and we were in houses at that point. So it didn't really make sense for us to like leave the line to go in the house to go see the show. And it was like, is in the lagoon, but I didn't really want to leave what I was doing to go see it. So I've heard it's really good and a lot of people love it. I didn't take my time to see it. Like I mentioned, I was kind of exhausted, so I was like trying to get through the houses. Oh, Academy of Villains, I didn't really talk about it. It's a dance show. It's amazing. They actually have like their own website and social media, so I'll link that down below. It's so good. If I could have taken like photos and stuff in it, I totally would have. Or videos, but I was kind of like just so enthralled. I will say though, it's really loud and really like flashy. So if you don't do well with lights, I would say almost for any part of Horror Nights, if you don't do well with like strobe lights, just be wary of that. It's also really loud. Next we did House of a Thousand Corpses, which was pretty terrifying for multiple reasons. So the house alone is scary. There were a couple scares where it looked like a dummy, and then all of a sudden it moved, and it was like, terrifying. But for me, I'm gonna give a tip on what not to do when you go to Halloween Horror Nights. So it was my boyfriend, myself, and then there was this other couple behind us, because you go in kind of in like a line into the houses. I didn't know the couple behind us. I mean, I talked to them briefly in the short line, but not really much. I'm partway through the house, and all of a sudden 2 hands grab my arms like on the shoulders, and I freaked out, because at Halloween Horror Nights, they can't touch you. You can't touch them. That's the rule. They can come like this, but they cannot touch you. This person grabbed me, and it scared the pants off me. It ended up being the woman behind me. She was so terrified, she grabbed my shoulders and put her head into my back. But I didn't know that. And it really scared me. Like, I screamed my way through the rest of the house until I like realized what happened. I was not in a okay state after that. I was like, I need a break. I need a break. So we took a break. We went to the bathroom. We got some drinks. Had some water, went over and actually got in line for a couple other things, which had like not long, like they weren't long waits because we had express, but they were like really long to get back to them because they're in like the backstage area. And that is where we did Universal Classic Monsters and Graveyard Games. And Universal Classic Monsters was my number one house, surprisingly. It was also my number one most scary house. There was Dracula, there was Frankenstein's monster, there was Frankenstein's bride, there was the creature from the Black Lagoon, there was, I don't think it's Phantom from the Opera or Phantom of the Opera. I'll have to put it like right here. I don't remember what it was. It was incredible though. Like it's a full church, not a full church, but like the inside of like a bell tower. We went underwater with the creature from the Black Lagoon. What else was it? Dracula, Frankenstein, creature from the Black Lagoon. The Mummy, you got to actually go into Imhotep's like tomb, which was incredible. There was also, there's a couple other ones that I'm blanking on, but I'll try to put them like right here if I remember. Amazing. The detail was just incredible. I loved that house. It was so detailed. Like I'd love to do just they do an Unmasking the Horror tour, which is like a behind the scenes lights on tour. I'd love to see that in that. A lot of people recommend doing that if you're scared but you're intrigued. Try that first, and then if you're still intrigued, then go and do Horror Nights, because they show you like all the boo holes for different houses. Now, you can't, I think you can put in like a request for a certain house, but it's not guaranteed. And you can't actually film in any of them. You can only take photos. And some of them even limit how many photos you could take. Like you could take one photo in this room, or you can take 2 photos in this room. So maybe look into that. But Universal Classic Monsters was incredible. It was my number one house. It was also the most scary for me, but I loved it. Like it was so detailed and beautiful and just, it was terrifying. There were so many monsters in it. Frankenstein's were just giant. Like they towered even over me. And there were multiples, which was like, but yeah, that was my number one house. It was also the most scary for me. We next did Graveyard Games, which I was also really scared about. This was a new IP, or not an IP. It was a unique concept. I can't think of what the phrase is. It's like someone from creative came up with it. And it basically has a whole story behind it. Like if you're waiting in the normal queue, there's actually like a social media feed that you can like read about what's happening, and you can like text into it and different things of that nature. I didn't have time because I had Express, but the backstory is like there's this old graveyard in this town that kids used to play this thing. It was called Ghost in a Graveyard, which was a game that they would play in the graveyard that kind of like respected their the past. Well, these 2 new kids come to town and they kind of just decide to be rebels and start to like spray paint and disrespect the dead, and are like knocking over tombstones, and they start to anger the dead. And that is what the concept of. They come back to get these 2 kids that are disrupting and causing harm to this graveyard. And it's what happens to them. Terrified. I was terrified going into this house. Now, let me preface this. Before I went I never closed my eyes on any of the houses. I totally could have. At one point, I looked down because there's a scare right in the beginning. And I started looking down because I was so freaked out. And I was like, no, you have to look up. Thank God I did. You walk into this building, the scare happens, and there is a gigantic castle. Like, it's almost like a full-fledged castle built inside a building. Just for Horror Nights. Like, so detailed. They had it where it was like kind of raining and misting on you. Terrifying house. Really beautiful, but terrifying. If you don't like paranormal stuff, you probably would not like that. The next house I did was the one I was most excited about, Ghostbusters. At this point, I'd already done 6 houses, which was more than halfway. So I was like, we can finish this in like the next hour. Hour and a half. After Graveyard Games, I'm not gonna lie, I took a little bit of break, sat down, got some water in me, made sure I was hydrating. Just because it's October, it's still like a bajillion degrees here. Like you can tell I'm kind of sunburnt. Next is Ghostbusters. I loved Ghostbusters so much for multiple reasons. Ghostbusters. I'm so glad I did not start with this house. Not that it was a bad house. It's actually either my number 2 or my number 3. It depends between that and Killer Clowns. So I'm really glad that I waited for this because there wasn't as many jump scares. And what I mean by jump scares is you're walking through a room and someone jumps out. It's more if you're walking into a room, someone's standing there and then they turn and say something to you. To me, that's not as scary as someone jumping out from like behind a wall. I think if I had done that house first, I would have been a lot more scared going into the other houses. There is a scene at the end with Mr. Stay Puffed. Yes, I just had to Google that. Where he's on fire and it literally smells like roasted marshmallows in the room, and it's incredible. There's a couple scare actors in that house also that get to, that are actually mic'd up and get to improv, which is also awesome. And there are a lot of Slimer scares. So if you love Slimer, he's in this house a ton. He's terrifying, especially he's one of the few that actually have like jump scares, and he about knocked me on my butt a couple times, but it was such a good house. It just made my heart happy. Then we did another original house called Yeti Terror of the Yukon. This house is insane. So it's based on the Yukon, and Yetis have basically kind of taken over and are destroying all these different hunting camps and things of that nature. You walk into this building, it's freezing cold, which is also awesome because it's still, like I said, a bajillion degrees out. But it's snowing. It's snowing in this house. And then all of a sudden, these giant Yetis, like, I'm not super tall. I'm not super short. I'm like 5'5". I think that is like average height. These Yetis were giant. Like my boyfriend's 6 foot tall. They were taller than him. Like they are huge. And they scared the pants off me. And it's not like one Yeti. There's like a bajillion Yetis. Like there was probably 15 to 20 Yetis in this house, which was just insane, unbelievable, great house. I think it's one of the really good IPs, or not IPs, like original concept houses. I love this. I would love to see this, not so much with the lights on, but like in more detail. The next house we did was Us, based off of the Jordan Peele movie. I'm not gonna lie, I was disappointed in this house. Now, I've never seen the movie Us. From what I've heard, the movie is just like the house, and like different things. If you've seen the movie, there are parts that like are really spooky. Because I've never seen the movie, I didn't really understand it. Like, I know they had the room with all the rabbits in it. Don't get that. And then they had I don't remember what it's called, but the room with, there's a thing where you walk by just like tons of people. I think they're holding hands or something like that. And you don't know what's real and what's not. So all of a sudden someone will step out in front of you, and it won't even be like a screen. They'll just step out in front of you and you're like, I did have a really like spooky moment though. I don't remember if it was in front of like a door or a window, but this one scare actor like came out, and he and I like made uncomfortable like amount of eye contact, and like because they have scissors, he was like rub the scissors on his face. It was so uncomfortable, and like it wasn't like, most people wouldn't say it's scary, but it was held just long enough to be like, I don't like this, it's really uncomfortable. So I know I was kind of disappointed in the Us house. I know a lot of people love it, and a lot of people said if you like the movie, it's just like the movie. And then the very last house we did, which had the longest wait, of course. When we got in line, we had Express Pass, but when we got in line, it had a 120-minute wait with Stranger Things. Now, I know a lot of people are most excited for this house. I've seen a total of like maybe 4 episodes of season 1 of Stranger Things. That house was intense. It seemed so long and so many like jump scares. Like I know a lot of people said they weren't scared in that house, but that house starts off with a bang. Stranger Things got us. Like, it starts off with a bang. Some of the houses will give you like a little bit to build the storyline, and then they'll go into jump scare or any type of scares. That started immediately, and the house seemed extremely long, and it felt like every time I turned a corner there was another scare, another scare. Like I felt like I literally could not get away. There were Demogorgons, there were Demodogs, there was Eleven, there was all the other characters. There was Hopper, the sheriff, I think his name's Hopper. You name it, they were in there. And the cast looked just like the ones from the movie, or from the TV show, which was incredible nonetheless. But yeah, after Stranger Things, we left because it was like 1 in the morning at that point. And I was exhausted and we still had to drive home. But I actually really had a great time. I wish I could have filmed more. I actually brought my camera, but it was so dark and so loud you probably wouldn't have been able to see anything. I didn't bring my big camera. I brought my little like point and shoot, and it just doesn't do well in low light. And you can't film in the houses or take photos in the houses, because there's a couple things. Like I would have loved a picture of the Mr. Stay Puft Man or one of the Slimers, but I just didn't. But yeah, I kind of love it. Some people have asked me, like in my real life, like would I go back next year? And I don't want to say I wouldn't go back next year, because obviously I had a good time. I seem excited about it. I enjoyed myself. I think I would go back if there was something I was interested in. There's been a lot of years in the past where like I hadn't heard of any of the like IPs, like the IPs that they use, like Ghostbusters or Killer Clowns from Outer Space or anything like that. Stranger Things, Us, whatever. I'd never heard of any of them, or I'd never seen them, or they were just something that wasn't my style. I would go back if there was something that was more my speed, but definitely. Like if they did, I'm trying to think of a house that, or like a horror movie that I've seen. If they did, there's a movie, I don't even know if it's considered a horror movie. It might be just a thriller. It's called The Forgotten, which I'll leave an IMDb to it below. But if they did a house on that, like I might go see it. Or like War of the Worlds, I might go see it. But I don't know if it was something like, I'm trying to think, like Halloween, or if they did another Us house. Like I don't think something like that would draw me in. When I say Halloween, I mean the movie Halloween with Mike Myers in it. Just because I've never seen those. So I think, you know, to wrap it up, if there's something that you are intrigued by and you can't get out of your head, like I really wonder how they're doing that, might it be worth checking it out. Now I will say, the earlier you go in the season, the cheaper it is. If you're really nervous about it, don't go opening day, wait for the vlogs to come out, check those out, get a feel for it. If you're still super nervous about it, bring some friends. I will say I did not expect myself to enjoy it at all. I expected myself to do Killer Clowns, Ghostbusters, and Stranger Things and want to leave. And after Killer Clowns, I was so excited to do the rest that like, it was so weird for me because it was such a brain shift. Like, oh, being scared doesn't have to be bad. So yeah, leave any questions or comments you have down below. Feel free to reach out to me on my social media, which is always linked down below, with any questions you have. I'm gonna honestly say I didn't expect to make this video. If you would have asked me at the annual pass holder night, hey, do you think you're gonna end up going to Halloween Horror Nights? No, they're like, even though you're really intrigued by the ghost hunt, yeah, no, it's just not my thing. And you know what? I'm really glad I went. So I'll leave any, like I said, leave any questions you have down below, and I'll see you next time. And this is Bridgette's Buzz.